So good morning. Here I am today at Hair Illusions with Yvonne. I have to tell you that when I first met Yvonne and she introduced me to this service, that I feel it's unique. It really and truly is. And it serves many purposes, which Yvonne is going to explain as we have this conversation. So Yvonne, good morning. Welcome.
Thank you.
Thank you for seeing me today. I really appreciate it. So, just in your own words, let's just talk about Hair Illusions and what it is exactly, because it kind of speaks for itself, but go ahead.
Hair Illusions is my company. I'm the
Yes.
owner-operator. I do all the procedures myself. It's a company to which adds, I think it gives people confidence. When you say Hair Illusions, it's the illusion of hair. So what I do is I put thousands and thousands of dots on the surface of your skin to replicate a natural shaven hair follicle. So whether you have hair or you have no hair at all, we can put the dots on the surface of the skin to give the hair illusion that you have a fuller head of hair or a full head of shaven hair. If that's a little...
Yeah, that's great. And primarily, your client base are men, obviously.
Majority are men, but I do women as well. Women with hormonal issues, they do thin, whether it be patchy or full scalp. You can go in and again you put the dots on the surface of the skin, so it gives that illusion of a full head of hair.
The thing that I was really impressed by, again, thank you for sharing with me on Friday. I came in on Friday, Yvonne was doing this gentleman, and even though I am a hairstylist, I was kind of struggling with how do you create the hairline so as that it's natural looking? And I was really impressed because you did create a very natural looking hairline. So can you just talk to me a little bit about that?
It's all by the placement of the dots.
Okay.
My motto is I can always redo, but I can't undo. Because the dots are of ink, once the dot is there, I cannot take it away. So what I do is I always approach it on a conservative level.
Okay.
So if they're uncertain of where they want the hairline, we start it back, knowing that if they want to drop the hairline or soften the hairline, we can always add more dots to do so. But if we start too far down on the forehead, I can't make it go back or recede it more. Exactly, I can't take those dots away. They're there. And then it goes by the placement of the dots. The more concentrated the dots are, the more defined that hairline will be. If you keep them loose and light right along the hairline, it will look more natural.
So I'm curious, I know with designing wigs, making wigs, you map it out, and do you have to do the same thing when you're doing this? Do you map out? So what is
A lot of it is personal preference.
Right.
If a client has a picture of how they see themselves or how they would like to see themselves, and maybe of themselves, maybe 5-10 years ago when they actually had a hairline, we can replicate that. Or if they have a picture of somebody else, that, oh, you know what, I really like that hairline, or I like the softness of that hairline, we can certainly recreate that as well.
And I'm curious, I'm sure it's not, you don't use the same color for all people, I'm guessing.
Yeah, colors are customized to the particular client. Because of course, if you're African American and your skin is very dark, I would use a much darker color than say I would on somebody who has light brown hair or gray hair. You can do gray hair as well. So you color match for the particular client.
So for example, for somebody like myself, I'm about 80% gray. How would you replicate that?
It's the softness of the color, and scalp micropigmentation is very technique sensitive. So it's not only the ink that I use or the color of the ink that I use, it's also the technique in which I use. So you can go in, and if you create another layer, by creating another layer of ink, you're actually darkening the color. Also by the concentration of the dots, that would give you a darker color as well. So I always go in soft, especially for gray, because there's nothing worse. In your case, you have hair. So if you were looking to add some density, I would always go soft along the hairline, because when you're looking at you, you wouldn't want it to look like you have painted scalp. So you wouldn't want something very sharp or defined at the edge of the hairline. You'd want something very soft and natural. And then of course, as we get farther back, you just start to concentrate the dots a little bit more.
Well, it was interesting because that gentleman that I spoke with on Friday that Yvonne was doing was sharing with me that I think he was having, well, he did have self-esteem issues.
Yeah.
And you could just see in his facial expressions how happy he was and how he was so much more confident. And I think we need to talk a little bit about that because, as I said earlier, you're addressing many needs. So it's not just the physical illusion that you're creating with hair, but it's also what you're doing to people's self-esteem and and how they perceive themselves.
I think that's more important, and that's why I do what I do. My youngest client was 14. He had no hair at all, and my oldest client was almost 80. So it doesn't matter your age. Scalp micropigmentation is a hair loss solution it could be your hair loss solution for anybody. And I think with the gentleman that you spoke with on Friday, remember what he said to you? He says, oh, I always wore a hat.
Yep.
Now I don't wear a hat. And that's the confidence that it gives them. You think it's just a dot, but it's putting everything together that changes them from the inside out.
Well, again, it's perception, right? When they look in the mirror, how they see themselves. And now they see themselves with having hair, and that feeling of self-consciousness goes away.
It's amazing what a little dot can do for you.
Wow, that's quite a phrase.
Yeah.
So
it's just dots. That's really all it is. It's just dots.
And I was surprised to learn that when you're doing the procedure, oftentimes the person that's getting the procedure done, they fall asleep. Yvonne turns the television on and they're watching a movie or whatever, and the next thing, so there's virtually no discomfort.
What I say on a man scale, because I always say men are babies, let's face it, they're babies.
Really?
Sorry.
No,
On a scale of 1 to 10, pain level is around a 2. And like you say, they fall asleep, they watch a movie, and they're perfectly fine. Either we chit-chat or they're fine. And if I did have a couple clients that came in and they didn't care how much it cost, they didn't care about the procedure, the only thing they cared about was the pain. So what I actually did was during the consultation, I actually did a little test patch.
Oh.
And they were like, oh, this doesn't hurt at all. So that eliminated their fear of the pain, and they were ready to go ahead because that was the only thing holding them back.
That's a great approach, actually.
Yeah. And many have had hair transplants as well, so they went through the pain of the hair transplant. And many clients, even though they've had the hair transplant, they're left with undesirable results. Maybe the density that they got wasn't enough, or they had a hair transplant in their early years and continually as they aged, they continued to lose more hair. So they're now thin again, but they maybe don't have enough donor hair, so they don't want to go through that hair transplant procedure again. So we go in and we can add more density that way.
So that's interesting. So people that have had hair replacement done, and I know how invasive that is, and it's painful and it's scarring and the whole bit. So you have the ability to go in and to kind of, again, create that illusion of a full head of hair.
Correct.
And I'm curious, how does that work with the scarring?
It's considered traumatized skin, so you do have to go again. Scalp micropigmentation is technique sensitive. So each area of the scalp could respond very differently. So my approach is I can always redo, but I can't undo. So I always go in very conservatively on the first session, and slowly we build the density that they like.
The one thing that I've always identified with hair transplants is the growth pattern of the hair follicle. Because if you take hair from just above the occipital bone and you transplant it towards the hairline, and the growth pattern is different, a different direction than the natural hair, it's so obvious. And I've seen that happen a lot.
Yeah.
And that was something that I noticed in your technique, is it just looks so natural.
You can change, I'm going to say you can change the size of the dot. Sometimes when a transplanted hair is put into its new home, the follicle or the dot that remains on the surface of the skin can be a little bit larger than your other follicles. There was a client that I did, just to give you an example. He had a hair transplant when he was in his mid to late 20s.
Okay.
Over the course of the next 10 years, he continued to lose hair. So when he had his transplant done, he only got transplanted hairs in the crown and across the front. So over the course of the next 8 years, this midsection here,
Oh, wow.
he went bald. So I actually have photos of what he looked like after he lost all this hair. But the hairs that were transplanted were so coarse that the dot that it left on the surface of the skin was very large. So I had to then go in and give that illusion that it wasn't a transplanted hair, that it was actually a natural hair follicle. And that's probably one of my biggest challenges for that particular client, because when you have hair transplants as well, you're left with the scarring. He had FUE, where they take out the little units at the back of your head, not the strip scar. So now he had little voided areas in the back, and you can use scalp micropigmentation for that as well. You go in and you just put little dots to replace the hairs that were taken out and put in somewhere else.
Because what I've seen in other transplant, when they do they basically scoop out and they take the hair follicle and they transplant it, but it leaves this little crater, if you will.
Mm-hmm.
So you're saying that you can create the illusion so that goes away.
Correct. So what's left behind, you have great density in the top if you have enough donor hair, but what's left at the back is you have areas of patches,
right,
or dots of areas that have no hair at all, because that hair's been removed. So now you have to go in and you have to camouflage that area.
So I'm curious.
Yeah.
I'm all about consultations.
Okay.
I know how important they are for me as a hairstylist and a color tech. What would your consultation be like when you meet a client for the first time?
I always like to hear a little bit about them first. When they started to lose their hair, when they arrive for the consultation, are they wearing a hat? Are they not wearing a hat? Do I have to ask them to remove their hat? That tells me their comfort level. I've had clients who are coming for consultation and I have to ask them to remove their hat. They don't even want to show it to me. They take it off, they put it right back on as soon as I've seen it. So you have clients that are coming in and they're okay with not wearing a hat, and some just leave the hat on. But I want to find out where their comfort level is. I also want to find out what their expectations are. Sometimes their expectations, they just want a hairline. They don't care what it looks like. They want the most defined hairline possible. But I always give them my expert opinion, because in the end, they generally don't go with what their expectations were when they came in. It's just not appropriate for their age.
So I'm curious, Yvonne, once somebody, well, I guess we should talk about how long does it actually take to do the procedure?
It depends on the degree of hair loss.
Okay.
It's a multi-session procedure. So if you're looking at somebody, say, who has no hair on the top of their head, or a Norwood 4 or 5, you're probably looking at 3 sessions, 3 complete sessions of approximately 4 hours. So we book, so if we were to do your procedure today, we would book 3 consecutive weeks. We would leave it a couple weeks, and then I would have you come back for another procedure. Sometimes that 4th procedure is not necessary, but sometimes maybe we just have to go in and perfect a little area, and we go back in and do it then.
So I'm curious, once it's done, how frequently, what's the maintenance regimen?
Maintenance is, of course, wearing your sunscreen.
Okay.
If you're in prolonged exposure to the sun, you should be wearing a hat, and moisturize, condition your skin as you would your face.
Okay. So I'm guessing, like a tattoo, eventually it does fade.
Correct.
So you would have to reshade, right?
Correct.
And that would be how often, do you think?
It really depends on the client. It depends on how well they take care of it.
Okay.
And I'm sorry I don't have a definitive answer, because everybody is very different.
Right.
Every year and a half. I had a client call me the other day. He was 3 years, 4 years out, and he didn't need a touch-up as of yet.
Wow.
So really it depends on how well you take care of it. Many times clients are coming back for touch-ups, not because they need the touch-up, but because over the years they've continued to lose hair. So I have to go back in and add more dots to conceal the now thinner areas.
So for somebody that has thinning hair, so especially from, let's say, the hairline back to the crown, you could go in with the dots and give the illusion of density would be much more.
Correct.
Or at least the illusion of density would be much more.
Correct.
So what percentage of your clients have hair that you do that procedure on versus the ones that, I know we spoke earlier and you told me that oftentimes you will have clients shave their head prior to coming in. So what's the percentage?
I would probably say 60-40 with little to no hair on top. as opposed to density. I think scalp micropigmentation is, we are just bringing awareness to the procedure. I have many clients like yourself who had never heard about scalp micropigmentation. So as people are becoming more aware that the procedure actually exists, the awareness is greater and you're getting more clients. A lot of females, a lot of the advertising on social media and different sites like that are more, you see scalp micropigmentation with men and they shave their head. So people associate scalp micropigmentation with a shaved head.
Right.
I'm unaware that you can do it for somebody who has hair as well. So I think it's just bringing more awareness to people, but majority of my clients currently have little to no hair at all.
I think this is a great interview, and I think it's something that's needed because I don't think, like myself, I have to say I was shocked to learn about the procedure, and I'd like to think I'm pretty knowledgeable when it comes to the industry, but I was not aware.
I wanted to get in the FUT and FUE as well, that you can use it for that as well, because people, again, are unaware that the service is suitable for that as well.
Can we expand a little bit on that? So FUE
is the hair transplant,
right,
where they take out the individual units. Okay, FUT is the strip.
Is the strip.
So somebody who wants to shave their hair at the back, but they're left with a strip going from ear to ear that has no hair in it, we can actually go in and put dots. So it just looks like he has shaved head at the back.
So the scar basically becomes...
The scar, to the best of my ability, the scar disappears. Sometimes the texture of this scar is a little bit different. Sometimes you can get a little bit of keloid scarring in areas, things like that, and the scar doesn't look as nice and flat. But from a distance, you're taking away that illusion of a white strip.
I found it interesting. You said that you had a client as young as 14. Wow.
He had no hair at all. He had alopecia, and he was actually moving to the States. And his family had him have the procedure done because he was teased and people made fun of him at school because he had no hair. So his parents thought, I want to move to the States, but they wanted him to have a fresh start. So we did the procedure. We did it nice and soft and natural, and he was so happy. In the end, he was so happy, yeah.
But you bring up a great point. Alopecia areata is a common disorder, and we're seeing more and more of it today because there's a direct correlation between alopecia areata and stress, as you know. And to be perfectly honest, I never even thought of that, but that's great that you can take hair illusion and mask that or blend it so that it's less obvious.
Exactly.
So can you just explain to me, like, how would that work?
When it comes to alopecia, sometimes clients with alopecia, it's one patch that stays in that position for the rest of their life. Sometimes hair grows back in that patch and they get a new patch. So depending on the client's needs, that's how I design my service. So if it's a patch that stays, we just go in and we do that patch. If it's patches that migrate to different areas, I always recommend doing a light treatment throughout the full scalp, so that if the hair should fall out in the future, they're covered that way.
I think that's a great solution because my experience has been people that do develop alopecia areata, oftentimes the hair does not grow back. And it's traumatic, especially for women. And oftentimes, as you know, it will occur just slightly behind the hairline. And I've seen, patches as big around as like that, where they've lost their hair and they're so self-conscious. So the fact that you have the ability to create the illusion of hair, that it blends with the rest, I think is great. I mean, especially again for a lady, because I can only imagine how challenging that would be.
I have done a lady.
Oh, really?
She had no hair at all, and she said she was prisoner to wigs. And now that she had this procedure done, she was so much more confident that she didn't have to continually wear the wigs when it was hot in the summertime. She could just be free and go with no wig at all. You touch the client, but I think you also touch the family as well, because the family sees how their loved one is struggling with the hair loss.
Absolutely.
So.
And one of the things that comes to mind, or I've had clients myself that have had very aggressive chemotherapy and they've lost their hair and it's never returned. And again, this would be a great option for them.
I've done a gentleman that had chemotherapy as well. You have to leave a little bit after, I say a year, after the chemotherapy treatments are all done. But when his hair grew back, it was very thin,
Yes.
and the texture of the
Texture was
hair
different.
was very baby-like. So he's just thrilled with
Wow.
the added confidence that these dots, again, have given him. And he's a survivor. So, yeah.
Well, I think what you're contributing to society is amazing. I think it's a gift. I think I'm so pleased to have this opportunity to be able to do this video with you, because to get this message out to folks, I think it has incredible value. So,
Exponentially.
Yvonne, I want to
Yes.
thank you so much for today.
Thank
This
you.
has been a great opportunity. I've learned a lot, and I'm sure that the folks that are going to watch this video are going to learn a lot. And I would anticipate some people reaching out to you. So,
Awesome. I'm here for them.
I learned a lot.
thank you so much.
Very
Yvonne.
good. Thank you. It was fun.